data estate modernization, but could have just have easily called it something like the modern data warehouse, or do you need a modern data warehouse, or data modernization, data warehouse modernization, because they're all somewhat synonymous. It's that whole notion of people have this legacy system of data in their environment on an enterprise data warehouse or some operational data stores. It's all on premise, primarily structured data, normalized data, sitting in a legacy SQL environment, possibly. A lot of large data moves with SSIS, SSRS reports, and somewhat more recently, maybe doing Power BI reporting against it. But as organizations began to gather other types of data outside their organization, more unstructured data, or they're wanting to do more data science type things with their data, or using a data lake or Databricks, et cetera, then they need to refactor the way they're doing or managing their data today. So real briefly, for those that joined who don't know me, my name is Matthew Bowers. I'm the Director of Data and Analytics here at Oakwood Systems Group. We're based out of St. Louis. I've been with the firm since July of last year. Prior to that, I worked for another local organization in the St. Louis market that focused on data and analytics. And then prior to that, I was a partner in another local Microsoft consulting firm in the St. Louis market. Came here to lead the data and analytics practice, and very excited to be here. Oakwood Systems Group has been in the market about 30 years. We're a gold partner. We hold about 10 gold competencies. We've been a past top 50 global partner, and we're a managed partner and a cloud economic partner. So that just means we do a lot of stuff in Azure. So why would organizations need to look towards modernizing their data warehouse or their data estate or their data environment? Primarily, traditional databases have a long-standing position, obviously, in most organizations, but those systems were designed originally for very structured data or normalized data or data coming out of operational business systems, and are no longer capable of keeping up with the organizational needs around managing their data, especially the newer types of data the organization may be bringing in. But also there's higher risk of security and compliance breaches. If you've been in the market for any time at all the last few years, you've seen organizations like Schnucks, one of the computer organizations, Best Buy, I think Deerberg's, other organizations have been compromised. So a cloud environment is typically more secure than these larger legacy on-prem systems. Having the older legacy model systems that are not as responsive causes you to sometimes be late to market with innovations. There are also fragility and downtime, untapped data. I don't know if I've never worked with an organization in the last 10 years as a consultant that did not have data silos all over the organization, higher maintenance costs, et cetera. So I won't read the whole slide to you. You get the picture. Where does all that data come from? So, historically in organizations, it's going to come from XML documents, other sources. Mainframes were a big source of legacy data several years ago, and still is to some extent. Application wrappers. This is all these different sources of data. Enterprise data warehouses that are sitting on-prem loaded with data for the last number of years. These can be the most valuable data assets your company has, but as we bring in other data, we need places to store data that's unstructured or that may not be structured as we're using it today, or may need other methods of ingesting the data and creating an environment where we can report against the non-typical sources of data. A little gratuitous quote from Microsoft: systems of intelligence encompass your people, processes, and technology. So all of us that have been in the technology space for a while, we understand that anytime we're wanting to transform an organization, it always encompasses people, process, and technology. And those three things will ultimately define your ability to be competitive in the market and to change the landscape of the industry that you participate in. And these are just a few statistics. I'm not going to go through and read all of it. I just found some of them interesting. Especially 91% of executives report that the pace of investment today in big data and artificial intelligence is increasing, while a number also report an urgency to invest in those technologies. The one that really stood out for me, though, is more than 175 zettabytes of data. zettabytes. I'd never even heard of a zettabyte until 2 weeks ago. I had to look it up. That's a 1 with 21 zeros after it. I mean, that's a 10,000 petabytes, or it's an incredible number, which is mind-boggling or almost incomprehensible to me. But the 150 billion devices connected across the globe by 2025, I actually think that number's a little low. I think that number is several years old. I would anticipate that being a bigger number by 2025, especially with just the sheer volume of wearables that people have that are able to track, retain, and store information or move information. So these are some things that are going to be involved in driving digital value creation across your organization. And it's going to drive the need for modernizing your data estate. Here's a few things that the industry is saying. Again, won't read the whole slide. I just think it's an interesting perspective to understand what different industries or verticals in the technology space have to say about their legacy data or the need to modernize their data. For instance, financial institutions say that legacy data platforms are their biggest obstacles. 60 to 80% of IT budgets are spent on maintaining legacy data systems. To me, that's an incredible number. IT professionals say transitioning from legacy infrastructure is too complex. So all these things are things that are, again, driving most organizations need, not just desire, but need to move or migrate to a more modern data landscape or data estate. Modern business needs a modern data estate. Again, so it goes back to the original first slide I showed, some of the issues with legacy data. Modern business data estates are being designed, architected, and deployed with some of those things in mind to address some of those concerns that were on that earlier slide. Obviously, more security, productivity, performance, artificial intelligence capabilities. So all these things are part of or driving what a modern business would value in a modern data estate. There's also an operational urgency in most organizations to modernize their data estate because volume, variety, and velocity. Data is just simply getting too big for legacy systems. Data needs to move faster than legacy systems can handle. One of the drawbacks to the legacy enterprise data warehouse has always been that it's a top-down approach to the data. You come in and you gather all your requirements, you work with your business, you define your data, you define your metadata, you define the organizational structure, you define your star schema, you build out your enterprise. I mean, sometimes it's a 6-9 month project before you begin to realize value or get reporting out of it. And then sometimes when you have really large systems with terabytes of data or even petabytes of data nowadays, doing your refreshes on a nightly basis, it literally takes all night long to refresh your data. So you don't see the value of the report today based on data today. You're seeing data from several days ago. So all these things are giving organizations a sense of operational urgency to updating their legacy data estate. But again, some other things that make it important to modernize the data estate from an industry view. Better managing of data, you're 23 times more likely to acquire customers with a modern data estate, based largely on the types of data you can now report against, where you have near real-time or real-time reporting on the functions of your business and what's going on within the organization. You're 6 times as likely to retain customers, 19 times as likely to be profitable as a result. So this might be a good point to stop. Do you have any questions up to this point before I move on? And we will, I'm sorry?
No, very interesting.
Okay. We will open it up near the end or at the end for a formal Q&A as well. But there's a few convenient break points through this content where I can stop and ask if we have questions. So up till this point, I've been just talking very high level, what it means to modernize your data estate, the urgency around doing such, why it's important, et cetera. But now we're going to talk a little bit about business drivers. At a very high level, some business drivers are a move to a more cost-effective infrastructure. So if you've been in this business a long time and you've got an enterprise data warehouse and as your data grows, you continually have to add storage. As your reporting needs become more complex, you may continually have to add compute power. You may have to, I know organizations that are going through hardware refresh or updates right now, just the cost of the equipment that you may need to maintain a large enterprise data warehouse environment with the storage and the compute power and stuff can become, over time, cost prohibitive. Moving it to a more cost-effective infrastructure, and in many cases that becomes the cloud, can become more cost-effective. We like to say cloud storage has become dirt cheap. You can get petabytes of storage for pennies on the dollar almost. The extreme high volumes of data and the velocity of data movement has become a big driver for modernizing, because you can't have that as those data volumes become higher and the movement of data becomes faster or greater velocity in an on-premise environment, you run into significant latency. Again, you're not getting information or reporting in real time or near real time, so you can't make effective business decisions. Also, changing regulatory requirements and disruptive technologies. All these things are the higher level business drivers for modernizing a data estate. But we also can look at other more granular reasons. One of the biggest drivers is, as I mentioned a couple times, new data sources. So marketing, for instance, modern marketing with third-party consumer data, online campaigns, or being able to do sentiment analysis, for instance. People like, you've probably read in the news or heard about someone being on an airplane, Southwest Airlines, they sit down, they get into a disagreement with someone on the airplane, they fire up Twitter on their phone and start complaining, and 10 minutes later, a gate agent's walking onto the plane and offering to help them. I mean, just how fast data moves from social media into a pipeline, into a data lake, gets run through the data science algorithm using Databricks or some other technology, reported on, and the results fed back out in near real time to somebody who can take care of the problem. You can't do that, for instance, in a traditional enterprise data warehouse. The more organizations are storing or wanting to access or get information from audio, video, and image files, digital supply chain, location data, data from sensors, wearables, or measuring devices, IoT and machine learning. I was involved in a proof of concept project several years ago for a global manufacturer of farming, agricultural, highway construction equipment who had not taken the time to modernize their data estate as yet. They did have a modern Oracle data warehouse, but they had 5 years of accumulated data coming off of sensors on their equipment out in the field that they simply didn't know what to do with. They didn't have a mechanism in place to analyze that data, to run algorithms against it, to run machine learning against it, because they were locked into a totally on-premises enterprise data warehouse that was only able to report against operational data. So all of these things around data sources alone are driving the need for most organizations to modernize their estate. Some typical business use cases, and the biggest one, and I got this first bullet point from an organization called TDWI, the Data Warehouse Institute. For those of you that have been working for any time in the data space, you're probably familiar with that organization or have attended some of their seminars. Data warehouse to business alignment is considered the leading driver for most organizations today. And all that means is the business today is changing direction in some way, either their market focus, their time to market, their R&D, how they're approaching their customers. So the business is changing in some way, and they need to go with that directional change to support their organization from a reporting perspective, for being able to get near-time or real-time data analysis to help support the business and derive digital or data value. The other big driver is newer and more advanced analytics. I mean, we've been hearing about big data. I mean, every time I've turned for 10 years, big data this, big data that. And for a long time, that just felt like a really nebulous term that didn't mean much. But as we're seeing more data coming from places like wearables or sensors or social media outlets or social feeds, being able to dump that data into a repository that can house or hold unstructured data, and then to be able to parse that through some type of data science process or using a tool like Databricks or something like that to format that data in a way that you can do reporting on it and analyze it. That has become a big driver as well. supporting the deployment or use of newer technology tools, so Hadoop or data lakes, being able to read data into or out of a modern data lake and being able to do reporting on it or using advanced analysis tools. Another big driver is the move more and more the last few years towards self-service analytics, or what some people call end user reporting or ad hoc reporting, or some in the industry call third wave BI. The movement towards business users having access of at least some type or some level to organizational data so that they can slice and dice and parse it and generate some of their own reportings. Tableau and Power BI have become huge tools for doing that. The IT organization giving business users access at least to some data sets where they can do that type of reporting is also driving some of these challenges. The big one that you hear about a lot lately, and I think real-time reporting may be there a little bit for some organizations for some types of data, et cetera, but I think it's more near-time reporting and analytics. You know, like the example I gave of the Southwestern Bell passenger who complains on Twitter and 10 minutes later he's being taken care of. Those things are becoming increasingly possible, relevant, available to us with these advanced technologies around the data science stack or advanced analytics. The need for data to be online continually for reporting. So traditionally in many data warehouse environments, we would just have snapshots of data or we would just see a part of the data. But today, organizations want or need more and more to have access to all of the data all of the time to do more robust reporting. And again, I mentioned IoT is one of the big drivers. So just some sample operational IoT use cases, you know, logistics, freight, supply chain, monitoring. I know a number of electrical companies around the country, Ameren, based out of St. Louis here, they've got a smart grids. They've got devices out there on all of the electrical monitoring devices around the St. Louis market so they can monitor things, monitoring equipment for maintenance needs or preventive maintenance. I mentioned that project I did 2 or 3 years ago. That was part of one of the outcomes of the project we did, helping that organization retrieve the data from the sensors coming off their equipment and then running it through a machine learning studio and doing analysis against the results coming off the sensors to do trending analysis. We were able to tell when certain pieces of equipment were about to fail because of the sensor data we were getting, or we could tell when maybe a part needed to be re-engineered because it was consistently failing a year before the warranty period ended. So things like that were available to us. Modernizing older legacy systems. So these are another one that I find fascinating because in my earlier career, I worked in the healthcare industry for a number of years. And I worked with a couple of local healthcare organizations here when I was at SenseCorp, understanding how we could get data from the sensors and medical devices and the alerting devices, specifically in ICU, CCU environments like that, where they've got all these things hooked up to people and the information is being pulled off. And they were wanting to use that information to do some analysis to better understand recovery rates so that they could begin to do some predictive analytics around patient recovery times or predicting when certain patients might crash and go backward or when they might regress or recidivate. So that was a very interesting use case. The modern data warehouse can support many transformative business processes such as operational reporting, just-in-time inventory, facility monitoring, et cetera. And I'll come back to that point in a minute. I wanted to ask a question of one of our audience members. Some foundations of the modern data warehouse. Why a modern data warehouse? Big data is now being assimilated more and more into enterprise data. New data sources are high volume. Advanced analytics demand large volumes. So some of these things are repetition of some earlier data points, but these are the foundational elements of a modern data warehouse. Typical characteristics. Massive linear scalability is the top one. You know, multi-parallel processing, Hadoop, cloud platforms, high performance for advanced analytics, in database, in memory, or decoupled, modern data integration and ingestion, any interface, lowered latency. All of these things are typical characteristics of a more modern data warehouse or data estate environment. There's a significant trending also in the industry towards either cloud data warehouses all into the cloud or hybrid environments, on-premise shared with cloud. All general cloud benefits apply to the modern data warehouse. So if you've been in the industry for any length of time and you've observed the trends and the growth in the cloud space, some of the biggest things that they use to position cloud as beneficial or as an organizational benefit is elastic scalability, speed, really cheap storage, ongoing and continuous support for new data sources. The modern data warehouse also in the cloud will support both old and newer use cases. Does a great job satisfying the data requirements for large enterprise organizations because you can scale that storage significantly into massive volumes. Multiple platforms is also a big part of it. Modernization often requires multiple platforms. If I need to do analytics against a bunch of unstructured data with a tool like Databricks, I'm not going to have access to that in a legacy on-premises enterprise data warehouse. But in a modern data estate deployed either on-prem or on hybrid or in the cloud, I can leverage a thing like a cloud-based enterprise data warehouse for my structured operational data. But if I've got social data coming in from somewhere, I can use another method for ingesting it into a data lake, running Databricks against it, and getting the analysis and the results I need. No single data platform can satisfy all requirements. Multiple platforms obviously provide more options. Right data to the right platform. So at this juncture, are there any questions? I'll just stop again real quick and check. So far, is this information valuable, interesting, boring? Y'all still there?
Sorry, muted. Yeah, very good.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, cool. All right. From where I'm sitting, I can't even see the screen, so I don't know how many people are still in the room with me. All right, so this is just, I know it's a busy looking screen, but this serves to sort of illustrate an overarching approach to how an organization might begin their journey towards becoming a more data-driven organization through modernizing their data estate. And if you look at the top, it always begins with an executive strategy. You have to have executive buy-in because this could be an expensive journey, but you need to create a data culture, set data-driven goals. Sometimes it involves assessing your organizational structure to see where people are going to fit into that. And then the line of business execution, define metrics in a dashboard, collaborate, share, have intelligent business applications, conversation agents, et cetera. And on the left-hand side, if you look, the big thing is data governance is always a huge concern. And unfortunately, too, I find sometimes as a consultant, you go into an organization and say, well, we need to, as part of this project, we need to think about governance. And you throw the big governance word out on the table and immediately you panic people. Oh, we did a governance project 2 years ago and it cost us $300,000. We're not doing that again. So sometimes you may need to use a different word than governance to get the same point across because you still have to have a process around how your data is going to be organized, who has access to what, how you're going to permission it, how are you going to leverage data in the different parts of the organization. If you're going to do a lot of more end user ad hoc reporting, how will the IT department structure data sets and provision data sets for the business users to use? How will you avoid duplications of data? A big example of that is I saw recently with a client around Power BI. Power BI makes it real easy for end users to grab a data set that IT has prepared and put out there for them, download it to the Power BI desktop, make some changes or edits to the report format or visualizations, and then push it back up to the Power BI service. And what we have found happening sometimes is in organizations, user A will pull it down to his desktop, change some visualization, push it back up. User B will pull it down, push it back up. And this actually happened recently in a meeting for an enterprise account in the St. Louis market I was working with. The users had done that, created some really beautiful, fancy reporting, went to an executive room to show it off. Two VPs in the room pointed at the screen and said, why is the data different here than it is over here? It was supposedly the same data set. And so there needs to be governance around your data is the point. Modern data platform, data sources and data lakes. So this is just while it's a busy screen, it's just sort of highlighting at a high level the 50,000 foot view of what this process looks like. And our next few screens are just some sample reference architectures of various ways you can format or build out a modern data estate or data environment. So this one, and again, so one of the things that's important to remember, wherever your data estate lives, whatever platforms you're using, however the technology is being deployed, you're still going to go through the same probably 4 processes that you would do with any data environment. I've got to be able to ingest my data. I've got to have a place to store the data. I've got to have a way to prep and train the data, model and serve the data. This particular example is just showing a variety of data sources such as log files, modal and structured data files. And in this case, we've replaced the traditional SSIS with Azure Data Factory. And the benefit to Azure Data Factory is, and I'm assuming that all of us who've been in the data space a while understand ELT, extract, load, and transform. That process is slowly being not replaced, but being, in some cases, bypassed in favor of doing a more an ETL process or ELT process. Am I getting it backwards? Extract, load, and transform. So you're transforming on the back end instead of in the middle. Azure Data Factory is a great tool for doing that. You can create pipelines to pump massive amounts of data somewhere else, such as a data lake. And then from the data lake, you can go in and do your transformations using other tools. So this is just one example, and I've got several. This is showing just another example of analytics on big data. It throws in a couple of other tools, such as Cosmos DB for massive amounts of storage, global storage, real-time apps, etc. And this is another one showing near real-time analytics. So these are just some of the ways that you can architect your data landscape or data estate solution for different types of analytics or different payloads or different approaches to how you want to manage, leverage, and use your data. Does that make sense? So ask a question at this juncture. How many of you on the call have heard of Azure Synapse Analytics? No one, I guess, huh?
Just heard of so far.
Okay, so everything up to this point is I've been just talking about the different the reasons for modernizing your data estate, the different ways you can do that, and then showing you a few approaches. Microsoft's current direction that they're wanting to lead their clients in for modernizing their data estate is a new product called Synapse Analytics. Unfortunately, for the moment anyway, if you go out to their product page for Synapse Analytics and look at the feature set, there's a page with 50 features listed. 2/3 of those are still in preview. I'm so anxious for everything to get out of preview so that we can really start doing some cool stuff with that product. Basically, Azure Synapse Analytics is SQL or Azure SQL Enterprise Data Warehouse on steroids. So Microsoft has literally taken their Enterprise Data Warehouse product, rebranded it, they're calling it Synapse Analytics, and then they're packing all this other stuff around it. It's truly a limitless analytics service that brings together enterprise data warehousing and big data analytics. We'll be giving you the creator freedom data on your terms, all these other things. One of the biggest, most exciting features of it that I've seen so far to me, which is still in preview mode, is the Synapse Studio, which is going to be a download that you install on your computer locally, and then you point it to your Azure Synapse workspace environment, and you basically have a single pane of glass from which you can manage all the elements and components of your data landscape, from ingestion to training to reporting, etc. So the Synapse Analytics product has several focus areas. It is considered today the best-in-class price per performance, industry-leading security, workload-aware query execution, data flexibility. If you have if anybody on the call is really curious, shoot me an email. I will share a couple links that I found recently. There's a couple of good quality demos on the internet that show some of these components in action, and especially the developer productivity side of it using the Synapse Studio. It's an amazing tool. This is showing how they've re-architected that solution. So if you look in the middle of this image here, the Azure Synapse Analytics, that's the main workspace where you're at. The ecosystem can be a variety of other platforms, data sources, etc. Azure Data Share is a component that allows you to share data across organizations without compromising data between organizations. Power BI is the predominant reporting tool against Synapse Analytics. And this was from the Synapse Analytics information page, just showing Microsoft's view of a modern data warehouse. And if you see in the middle of it, ingest, prepare, transform, it's showing all the different products. But in the Synapse Analytics piece, Synapse Analytics takes all of those other components and wraps it up in a wrapper. And using the Synapse Studio gives you access to actually view, manage, monitor, create pipelines, do everything from, again, a single pane of glass. It's really an exciting product. It's considered the integrated data platform for BI, AI, and continuous intelligence. A lot of it based on Azure Data Lake storage. The really cool thing is if you've done a lot of work in SQL, managed SQL or some other SQL tools the last few years, you've always had the ability to write queries or information in T-SQL. Recently, Microsoft added Python, for instance, to their code base for being able to write stuff against SQL. Here, a data scientist can get in and actually write code within the Synapse Studio with R or Scala. You can actually write with Java. So this platform significantly expands this tool set with which you can use to write queries or write custom code to manage things within the environment. It also includes the analytics runtime thing. Spark is built into the platform. Any questions here? And then this is just another version of that previous slide, but it's showing the connected services on the right-hand side. These are all of the Azure data services currently that are going to be connected as a connected service into Synapse Analytics. So a significant, I think this, I'm very enthusiastic and excited. I see this product being a significant game changer, both in the analytics space in general, but also for Microsoft. If those of you who have worked in the data space for any time have worked with or familiar with a product called Snowflake, you know that Microsoft opened that up so you can host your Snowflake environment in Azure. But I recently heard in a session that Microsoft is positioning Synapse Analytics specifically also to go after the Snowflake market, which is an interesting play. This talks about your data estate modernization, what the customer journey looks like. And again, as with any product or any project in the technology space or in IT, you always have to start with a good requirements gathering phase, business analysis, understanding the needs, and obviously you need to involve the business. I've been working as an IT professional for nearly 30 years, and I've seen my share of successful projects and failed projects. And by and large, the ones that I've seen fail is when IT drove everything about the project and did not involve the business. For example, not talking to your CFO or accounting folks when you're dealing with accounting data. They know that data better than anybody in IT will. So if you fail to include the right people in the right phase in the project, it fails. Assess your current data estate. So one of the ways that Oakwood, for instance, approaches that is we have a standard engagement that we do. I've got contracts out to a couple of local clients basically a 4-week or 160-hour engagement to come in and assess their current data estate, where they're at, understand where they want to go based on their requirements, and then doing a gap analysis so that we better understand that, and then drawing up the modernization roadmap, setting up the engagement, planning, implement, build, validate. That's often an iterative, agile-like process, and then eventually deploy and cut over to a new environment. A fairly standard process for most projects in the technology space, just fancy wording here. Beginning your transformation journey can take on several approaches, or you can view it several different ways. Some organizations choose to start with simply rehosting. And one of the more common ways I see that happening is I'm talking to an organization right now that's got several hundred, literally, SQL Server 2008 or 2008 R2 servers in their data centers in their environment. And as most of us know, Microsoft support for SQL Server 2008 ended some time ago. So one of the easiest ways to resolve that issue is to do a migration, simply do a SQL Server migration from on-premise to any one of the 3 or 4 hosted options available in Azure, such as SQL Server Managed Instance. A next phase, or some people may choose to skip rehosting and go right to the refactoring phase, taking advantage of Azure data services with minimal changes to your environment. In some cases, that may be necessary, or some organizations may choose to leap to the re-architect phase, where they go in and they re-architect and build out their new data estate fully cloud ready. So these are just some of the options, or how that journey may play out. Then we actually have a methodology or approach for that. So again, a standard project management approach or methodology: capture and define requirements, assess, design, deploy. These are some of the types of services and engagements that a customer can look at. We recommend an approach like this, or very similar to this, whether you work with us or anyone else. Standardized approach to crafting an engagement around how you're going to approach modernizing your data estate. And I love this slide. I just throw this in a lot of my presentations because I think it's really cool. This is the current data landscape in Azure. So these are all the different products and offerings within the Azure space that can be optionally included as components or part of the platform in your Azure data landscape, in your data estate. Oh boy, I forgot to take those transitions out. That's ugly. And this is a slide that this is a reference architecture for what a sample data estate could look like, purely as a platform as a service, all hosted on Azure. All the components you see in here can be plugged in and out in different ways to address your specific data needs. So this concludes my presentation, so I'll open it up for more Q&A if people have questions. Also, as Tim mentioned, I will be sharing out this presentation. We'll be emailing it out to everyone who was here today participating. So what might be next? So one of the things I always like to end one of my webinars with is an offer. If anyone on the call would like to reach out to us and hear more about this topic, or have me or someone from our data and analytics team come on site and deliver a more lengthy, deeper technical dive or a lunch and learn around this topic, I'd be happy to do that. If there's any components of what we talked about today that you'd like to see some demos of, happy to come out and do some demo sessions with you. One of the other things that I like to offer is St. Louis is one of only 15 cities in the United States that has a Microsoft Technology Center. And they offer a variety of customer immersion experiences, architectural design sessions, and trainings. If an organization wants to come into the Microsoft Technology Center and actually participate in a data and analytics architectural design session to understand how they could modernize their data estate, get some free architectural guidance, or if they would like to come into the Technology Center and do a 3 or 4 hour customer immersion experience in the Azure data world. I would be happy to broker that. The director of the Microsoft Technology Center here in St. Louis is a friend of mine, Merrill Shabaum, and I've reached out to him several times, and he is open to me bringing in a number of people from organizations to sit down and do these things. The other thing we can do is if you'd like to sit down and talk about a smaller proof of concept to just see if some of the things that we talked about today are a fit for you and your organization today. That's one of the things we can do. Also have, in addition to just lunch and learns, we can do other types of briefings or full day workshops, etc.
Good. So we'll just leave a couple more seconds for any questions. Otherwise, as Matt said, we'll make sure to get out a digital file of this so everyone can review if they need to.
And I would just ask, has this been valuable, or was this a waste of your time?
I thought it was very good, very interesting. I appreciate your time, Matt.
Very good. And so another quick question, just as an aside, if you as an individual or organization, if you participate very often in activities like this or webinars, if there would be topics that you would like to hear more about, or a specific platform or technology within the Microsoft data space that you would like to do a deeper dive on, feel free to reach out to us and let me know, and we can start planning some webinars around other topics that might be of greater interest.
Mm-hmm. Good. Well, thanks, everybody.
Y'all all have a wonderful day. Stay safe out there. Stay warm.
Great. Thank you, Matt.
All right. Thank you. See you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
I know.
Nice. Weird. So